Question 1. During the evaluation of a registered representative's trading activity in Ontario, Canada, a registered options principal (ROP) notices a consistent pattern where the representative executes a significant number of option trades that, while not resulting in substantial losses, generate very minimal net profits after accounting for commissions and fees. The representative states that these trades are part of their strategy to explore market opportunities. What is the most appropriate supervisory action for the ROP to take? Option A. Review the representative's trade blotters, commission reports, and client account statements to analyze the profitability and frequency of these trades, and then engage in a direct, fact-based discussion with the representative to understand their strategy and client suitability. Option B. Immediately report the representative's trading pattern to senior management and the firm's compliance department for an immediate review and potential disciplinary action. Option C. Advise the representative to cease all option trades that are projected to yield less than a 5% net profit after commissions, without further investigation into the representative's rationale. Option D. Ignore the pattern, assuming the representative's explanation of exploring market opportunities is sufficient, and focus supervisory efforts elsewhere. Correct answer is A. Review the representative's trade blotters, commission reports, and client account statements to analyze the profitability and frequency of these trades, and then engage in a direct, fact-based discussion with the representative to understand their strategy and client suitability. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge for registered options principals (ROP) in Ontario, Canada, concerning the supervision of a registered representative's trading activity. The challenge lies in balancing the need for effective oversight with the representative's autonomy and the firm's operational efficiency. A ROP must identify potential red flags without unduly stifling legitimate trading strategies or creating an overly burdensome supervisory environment. The specific context of a representative consistently executing trades that appear to generate minimal profit but incur significant commission costs requires careful scrutiny under Ontario's Securities Commission (OSC) Rule 31-505 and EROC, now CSIRO, Dealer Member Rule 2500. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a proactive and data-driven approach. This entails reviewing the representative's trading activity, specifically focusing on the pattern of trades that generate low net profits after commissions. The ROP should analyze trade blotters, commission reports, and client account statements to identify the frequency, size, and profitability of these trades. This analysis should then be used to initiate a direct, fact-based conversation with the representative to understand their strategy, the rationale behind these specific trades, and whether they are in the best interest of the clients. This approach directly addresses the potential for excessive trading or churning, which is a violation of the duty of care owed to clients and a breach of supervisory responsibilities under OSC Rule 31-505 and CSIRO Dealer Member Rule 2500. It allows for an informed assessment of whether the representative's actions are compliant and client-focused. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to dismiss the pattern as insignificant simply because the representative claims they are testing strategies without further investigation. This fails to acknowledge the potential for abuse and the ROP's obligation to supervise. Ignoring such a pattern could lead to client harm and regulatory sanctions for both the representative and the firm, violating the principles of fair dealing and client protection mandated by the OSC and CSIRO. Another incorrect approach is to immediately escalate the matter to senior management or compliance without first attempting to gather information directly from the representative. This bypasses a crucial step in the supervisory process, potentially damaging the working relationship and failing to provide a complete picture of the situation. It also suggests a lack of confidence in the ROP's ability to conduct initial due diligence. Finally, implementing a blanket policy requiring pre-approval for all trades that generate less than a certain profit margin, without considering the context or the representative's overall performance and client suitability, is overly restrictive and may hinder legitimate trading activities. Such a broad measure could be seen as punitive rather than supervisory, and might not effectively address the root cause of the observed trading pattern. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach supervisory challenges by first gathering objective data. This data should then inform a direct, professional inquiry with the individual being supervised. The goal is to understand the why behind observed behaviors. If the explanation is satisfactory and compliant, the matter is resolved. If not, or if further investigation is warranted, the ROP should then escalate with specific documented concerns. This systematic process ensures fairness, thoroughness, and compliance with regulatory requirements. Question 2. What factors determine the appropriate implementation strategy for a new cloud-based customer relationship management (CRM) system by a New York-based broker-dealer to ensure compliance with SEC Regulation SB regarding the privacy of consumer financial information and the safeguarding of personal information? Option A. A thorough risk assessment of the CRM's data security features, alignment with existing privacy policies, and comprehensive employee training on updated procedures. Option B. Prioritizing the cost-effectiveness of the CRM system and deferring detailed privacy and security reviews until after full integration. Option C. Immediate deployment of the CRM system, assuming vendor compliance with privacy regulations, with policy updates to follow. Option D. Relying exclusively on the CRM vendor's assurances of regulatory compliance, without independent verification or integration into firm-specific policies. Correct answer is A. A thorough risk assessment of the CRM's data security features, alignment with existing privacy policies, and comprehensive employee training on updated procedures. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a registered options principle in New York to balance the firm's operational efficiency with the stringent privacy obligations mandated by SEC Regulation SB. The principle must ensure that the firm's data handling practices are not only compliant, but also robust enough to protect sensitive customer information from potential breaches, especially when integrating new technologies. Failure to do so can result in significant regulatory penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. Careful judgment is required to implement safeguards that are both effective and practical within the firm's operational framework. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a comprehensive review and update of the firm's existing privacy policies and procedures, specifically addressing the integration of the new cloud-based CRM system. This approach necessitates a thorough risk assessment of the CRM's data handling capabilities, ensuring it meets or exceeds the requirements of SEC Regulation SB, including data encryption, access control, and breach notification protocols. The firm should also conduct employee training on the new system's privacy features and the firm's updated policies. This is correct because it directly addresses the regulatory mandate of safeguarding customer information by proactively identifying and mitigating risks associated with new technology, ensuring ongoing compliance with SEC Regulation SB's requirements for privacy notices, safeguarding customer information, and implementing policies and procedures for responding to data breaches. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing the new cloud-based CRM system immediately without a formal risk assessment of its data security features, and without updating existing privacy policies, would be a significant regulatory failure. This approach neglects the core tenets of SEC Regulation SB, which requires firms to have policies and procedures in place to safeguard customer records and information. It also fails to ensure that the new system's data handling practices align with the firm's privacy notice obligations. Relying solely on the CRM vendor's stated compliance with privacy regulations, without independent verification or integration into the firm's specific policies, is also professionally unacceptable. While vendor compliance is important, SEC Regulation SB places the ultimate responsibility on the registered firm to ensure the safeguarding of customer information. This approach outsources a critical compliance function without proper oversight, focusing exclusively on the cost-effectiveness of the new CRM system, while deferring privacy and security considerations to a later, unspecified date, is a direct violation of SEC Regulation SB. The regulation mandates that firms implement policies and procedures to protect customer information as a fundamental aspect of their operations, not as an afterthought. This approach prioritizes financial considerations over legal and ethical obligations. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a proactive and risk-based approach to technology implementation. This involves a systematic process of 1. Identifying potential privacy and security risks associated with any new system or process. 2. evaluating the system's capabilities against regulatory requirements, in this case, SEC Regulation SB. 3. Developing and updating internal policies and procedures to reflect these requirements and mitigate identified risks. 4. Implementing robust training for all relevant personnel. And 5. Establishing ongoing monitoring and review mechanisms to ensure continued compliance. This structured approach ensures that regulatory obligations are met comprehensively and effectively. Question 3. The audit findings indicate a discrepancy in the margin calculations for clients' complex options portfolio held at a brokerage firm in California. The registered options principal is reviewing the situation and needs to determine the most appropriate course of action to ensure compliance with FINRA Rule 4210. Which of the following approaches best reflects professional judgment and regulatory adherence? Option A. Conduct a detailed review of the client's options positions, applying the specific margin calculation methodologies outlined in FINRA Rule 4210 for each type of option and strategy, and verify that the account equity meets the calculated requirements. Option B. Apply a general margin requirement percentage to the total market value of the options positions, assuming this will adequately cover the risk. Option C. Immediately liquidate all options positions in the client's account to eliminate any potential margin deficit without further analysis. Option D. Rely on the client's assertion that their account has sufficient equity to cover any potential margin calls, given their experience in options trading. The correct answer is A. Conduct a detailed review of the client's options positions, applying the specific margin calculation methodologies outlined in FINRA Rule 4210 for each type of option and strategy, and verify that the account equity meets the calculated requirements. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential lapse in understanding and applying margin requirements for options positions, a critical area for maintaining financial stability and regulatory compliance in the securities industry. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a nuanced understanding of the financial industry regulatory authority, FINRA, rules, specifically Rule 4210, which governs margin requirements. Misinterpreting or misapplying these rules can lead to significant financial risks for both the firm and its clients, potentially resulting in regulatory sanctions, financial losses, and reputational damage. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all margin obligations are met accurately and promptly. The best professional approach involves a thorough review of the client's options positions against the current FINRA Rule 4210 margin requirements, considering the specific characteristics of each option e.g., calls, puts, American vs. European style, and the underlying security. This approach necessitates understanding how to calculate the required margin for both long and short positions, including strategies like covered calls, naked puts, and spreads, and ensuring that the client's account equity is sufficient to meet these requirements. It also involves recognizing when additional margin may be called for due to market volatility or changes in the position's risk profile. This is correct because it directly addresses the regulatory mandate of FINRA Rule 4210, which aims to prevent excessive credit and ensure that firms maintain adequate capital to cover potential losses. Adhering to these calculations and requirements is a fundamental ethical and legal obligation for registered options principals. An incorrect approach would be to rely solely on the client's stated intent or a general understanding of margin without performing the specific calculations mandated by FINRA Rule 4210. This fails to acknowledge the firm's responsibility to independently verify margin compliance. Another incorrect approach is to apply a simplified margin calculation that does not account for the specific risk factors inherent in different option strategies, such as the potential for unlimited losses on naked short calls. This demonstrates a lack of diligence and a failure to grasp the complexities of options margin. Lastly, assuming that a client's existing equity is automatically sufficient without performing the required margin calculations is a dangerous oversight. It bypasses the core protective mechanism of margin rules and exposes the firm and the client to undue risk. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory adherence and client protection. This involves staying current with FINRA rules, seeking clarification from compliance departments when unsure, and conducting regular reviews of client accounts to ensure ongoing compliance with margin requirements. When faced with complex options positions, it is crucial to consult detailed margin handbooks and, if necessary, seek expert advice to ensure accurate calculations and appropriate risk management. Question 4. The assessment process reveals that a new client account has been opened with the intention of trading options, and the client has indicated they have signed the required options agreement. As the registered options principal in Ontario, Canada, what is the most appropriate next step to ensure compliance with regulatory requirements? Option A. Proceed with placing options trades based on the client's verbal confirmation of having signed the agreement, assuming the documentation will be forwarded shortly. Option B. Rely on the client's registered representative to ensure the signed options agreement is eventually submitted and processed without direct confirmation from the principal. Option C. Initiate options trading immediately to capitalize on potential market opportunities, with a plan to follow up on the signed agreement later in the day. Option D. Proactively confirm receipt of the fully executed and complete options agreement from the client or the registered representative, handling the account before any options trades are placed. The correct answer is D. Proactively confirm receipt of the fully executed and complete options agreement from the client or the registered representative handling the account before any options trades are placed. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a common challenge in the registered options principal role, ensuring that customer verification and the subsequent receipt of signed options agreements are handled with the utmost diligence. This scenario is professionally challenging because a failure in this process can lead to significant regulatory violations, financial losses for the firm and the customer, and reputational damage. The principal must balance efficiency with strict adherence to compliance requirements, recognizing that incomplete or improperly documented agreements can invalidate the firm's ability to execute certain trades on behalf of the client and expose both parties to undue risk. Careful judgment is required to identify and rectify any gaps in the verification and agreement process before trades are initiated. The best professional practice involves proactively confirming that all required documentation, including the signed options agreement, has been received and is complete for each customer before any options trading activity commences. This approach ensures that the firm has met its regulatory obligations under FINRA rules, specifically regarding the suitability and authorization of options trading for the customer. It also protects the customer by ensuring they have acknowledged and agreed to the risks associated with options. This proactive confirmation minimizes the risk of executing trades without proper authorization or understanding, thereby preventing potential disputes and regulatory scrutiny. An approach that relies solely on the assumption that documentation will be processed in due course without explicit confirmation is professionally unacceptable. This failure to verify receipt and completeness of the signed options agreement constitutes a breach of regulatory requirements. It creates a significant risk that trades could be executed for customers who have not formally agreed to the terms and risks of options trading, violating the principle of customer protection and potentially leading to suitability issues. Another professionally unacceptable approach is to proceed with options trading based on verbal confirmation from the customer that they have signed the agreement, without physically receiving and reviewing the signed document. A verbal communication can be a part of the process. It does not substitute for the required written, signed agreement. This bypasses a critical compliance checkpoint and exposes the firm to the risk of disputes regarding the customer's actual consent and understanding of the agreement's terms. Finally, an approach that prioritizes the speed of account opening and trading over the thorough verification of the signed options agreement is also professionally unsound. While efficiency is valued, it must never come at the expense of regulatory compliance and customer protection. Delaying trading until all documentation is verified is a necessary step to ensure that the firm is operating within legal and ethical boundaries. Failing to do so can result in significant penalties and a breakdown of trust with both customers and regulators. Professionals should employ a systematic checklist approach for account opening, specifically including a step to verify the receipt and completeness of the signed options agreement. This checklist should be integrated into the firm's standard operating procedures and reviewed by the principal. When any doubt or discrepancy arises regarding the documentation, the principal must halt further trading activity until the issue is resolved and the necessary documentation is properly secured and verified. This proactive and systematic method ensures consistent compliance and robust customer protection. Question 5. The evaluation methodology shows that a new high-net-worth client in California is eager to begin trading complex option strategies immediately. The client, who claims extensive prior experience with options, has verbally agreed to the terms of an options account, but has not yet signed the formal options account agreement or the risk disclosure statement. Your firm's policy, in line with FINRA regulations, requires these documents to be fully executed by the client and reviewed by compliance before any options trading can commence. The client is pressing you to execute a trade today, stating that they have a time-sensitive opportunity. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Initiate the account opening process and execute the trade, but inform the client that they will need to sign the documents before their next trading day. Option B. Inform the client that their stated experience is sufficient and proceed with opening the account and executing the trade, while forwarding the unsigned documents to compliance for review. Option C. Proceed with opening the account and executing the trade, with the understanding that the client will sign the required documents later that day. Option D. Politely but firmly explain to the client that trading cannot begin until the signed options account agreement and risk disclosure statement are received and reviewed by compliance, and offer to expedite the process for them. The correct answer is D. Politely but firmly explain to the client that trading cannot begin until the signed options account agreement and risk disclosure statement are received and reviewed by compliance, and offer to expedite the process for them. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows that this scenario is professionally challenging because it pits the immediate need to secure a new client and generate revenue against the fundamental regulatory requirement to obtain all necessary agreements before opening an options account. The Registered Options Principal (ROP) is under pressure to facilitate a transaction quickly, potentially overlooking crucial compliance steps. This requires careful judgment to prioritize regulatory adherence over short-term business gains. The correct approach involves ensuring that all required agreements, specifically the options account agreement and the risk disclosure statement, are fully executed by the client and reviewed by the firm before any options trading activity commences. This aligns with FINRA Rule 2111, Suitability, and the specific requirements for opening options accounts, which mandate that the firm must have a signed agreement from the customer, acknowledging the risks associated with options trading and agreeing to the terms of the account. This proactive approach safeguards both the client and the firm from potential future disputes and regulatory violations. An incorrect approach would be to allow the client to begin trading options based on a verbal agreement or a promise to sign the necessary documents later. This violates the principle of obtaining written consent and acknowledgement of risks prior to engaging in such a complex and potentially volatile trading activity. It exposes the firm to significant regulatory risk, as it demonstrates a failure to adhere to established procedures for account opening and suitability. Another incorrect approach is to proceed with opening the account and executing trades while the required agreements are still pending review by the firm's compliance department. While the client may have signed, the firm's internal review and approval process is a critical step in ensuring that the account is suitable and that all regulatory requirements are met. Delaying this internal review, even with a signed client agreement, can lead to accounts being opened that are not properly vetted, potentially exposing the firm to risk. Finally, an incorrect approach is to rely solely on the client's experience in options trading as a substitute for obtaining the signed options account agreement and risk disclosure statement. While a client's experience is a factor in suitability, it does not absolve the firm of its obligation to obtain the specific, signed documentation required by regulations for options accounts. This documentation serves as a critical record of the client's understanding and agreement to the terms and risks. The professional reasoning process should involve a clear understanding of the regulatory requirements for opening options accounts. When faced with pressure to expedite a transaction, the ROP must pause and confirm that all mandatory documentation, including the client's signed agreement and acknowledgement of risks, has been obtained and processed according to firm policy and regulatory rules. If any step is missing, the ROP must insist on its completion before proceeding, even if it means delaying the client's trading activity. Question 6. Operational review demonstrates that a registered representative at a FINRA member firm in California is opening a new options trading account for a client. The firm's standard procedure is to send the options disclosure document (OD) to the client, Which of the following actions best ensures compliance with the regulatory requirements for furnishing options disclosure documents? Option A. Furnishing the options disclosure document to the client prior to approving the account for options trading. Option B. Furnishing the options disclosure document to the client only after they have made their first options trade. Option C. Sending the options disclosure document to the client concurrently with the account approval confirmation. Option D. Furnishing the options disclosure document to the client only when they specifically request information about options risks. Correct answer is A. Furnishing the options disclosure document to the client prior to approving the account for options trading. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common operational challenge in a brokerage firm dealing with options trading. The core difficulty lies in ensuring that all necessary disclosures are made to customers in a timely and compliant manner, especially when dealing with different types of accounts and varying levels of customer experience. Failure to provide the correct disclosure documents at the appropriate time can lead to regulatory violations, customer disputes, and reputational damage. The firm must balance efficiency with strict adherence to regulatory requirements. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves furnishing the options disclosure document (OD) to every customer prior to approving their account for options trading. This approach aligns directly with the regulatory framework in the United States, specifically the requirements under FINRA rules. The ODD provides essential information about the risks and characteristics of standardized options. Providing it before account approval ensures that the customer has the opportunity to review and understand these risks before engaging in options transactions. This proactive disclosure is a cornerstone of investor protection and a mandatory step for firms facilitating options trading. Incorrect approaches analysis. Furnishing the ODD only after the customer has made their first options trade is a significant regulatory failure. This approach violates the principle of providing risk disclosures in advance, leaving the customer exposed to risks they may not fully comprehend at the moment of their initial transaction. It is a reactive measure rather than a proactive safeguard. Sending the ODD concurrently with the account approval confirmation, but without explicit confirmation that the customer has received and reviewed it before trading, is also insufficient. While closer to compliance, it lacks the assurance that the customer has actually had the opportunity to digest the information before placing trades. The regulation emphasizes providing the document prior to approval, implying a window for review. Providing the ODD only upon the customer's specific request for information about options risks is inadequate. This approach places the onus on the customer to identify and seek out risk disclosures, rather than on the firm to proactively educate them about the inherent risks of options trading as a prerequisite for account approval. This fails to meet the firm's obligation to ensure customers are adequately informed before engaging in such complex products. Professional reasoning. Professionals must establish clear internal procedures that mandate the delivery of the ODD to all prospective options traders before their accounts are approved. This process should be integrated into the account opening workflow, with electronic or physical confirmation of delivery and review. When in doubt about the timing or content of disclosures, always err on the side of providing more information earlier rather than later, and consult the firm's compliance department. The goal is to ensure informed consent and robust investor protection. Question 7. Benchmark analysis indicates that a new client in California has expressed a strong desire to actively trade uncovered option contracts, citing their potential for high returns. The firm's compliance department has flagged this as a high-risk account opening. As the registered options principal, what is the most appropriate course of action to ensure compliance with California's regulatory framework and FINRA rules governing uncovered option contracts? Option A. Approve the account but restrict trading to only covered option strategies, as this mitigates the firm's and client's risk. Option B. Open the account with a substantial initial deposit and inform the client that the suitability review for uncovered options will be conducted after their first few trades. Option C. Approve the account for trading uncovered option contracts immediately based on the client's stated desire and the firm's goal of expanding its client base. Option D. Conduct a thorough suitability review to assess the client's financial capacity, investment experience, and understanding of the risks associated with uncovered option contracts before approving the account for such trading. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough suitability review to assess the client's financial capacity, investment experience, and understanding of the risks associated with uncovered option contracts before approving the account for such trading. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a registered options principal (ROP) to balance the firm's need to facilitate client business with the paramount regulatory obligation to ensure that clients understand and are capable of handling the risks associated with uncovered option contracts. The firm's desire to onboard a new, potentially high-value client quickly must not override the stringent requirements designed to protect both the client and the firm from financial harm due to a lack of understanding or preparedness. The ROP must exercise careful judgment to avoid both regulatory violations and potential client losses. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough review of the client's financial situation and investment objectives, followed by a detailed discussion of the risks and potential outcomes of uncovered option strategies. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the core regulatory requirement of FINRA Rule 2111, suitability, and the specific requirements for opening accounts for uncovered option contracts, which mandate that the firm must have reasonable grounds to believe the client has the financial capacity and understanding to meet the obligations associated with such positions. A comprehensive suitability determination and client education are essential before approving the account for uncovered option trading. This ensures compliance with the spirit and letter of regulations designed to prevent unsuitable trading. Incorrect approaches analysis. Approving the account solely based on the client's stated desire to trade uncovered options without a proper suitability review is a significant regulatory failure. It bypasses the fundamental obligation to assess the client's financial capacity and understanding of the inherent risks, potentially exposing the client to substantial losses they cannot absorb. Opening the account but restricting it to only covered option strategies, despite the client's explicit request for uncovered options, is also professionally problematic. While it mitigates some risk, it fails to address the client's stated investment intent and does not fulfill the requirement to properly assess and approve the client for the specific type of trading requested. The firm should either approve the client for uncovered options after a proper review or decline to offer that specific trading capability if the client does not meet the criteria. Allowing the account to be opened with a high initial deposit, but deferring the suitability review until after the first trade is a critical regulatory and ethical lapse. The suitability determination must precede any trading activity, especially for complex and risky strategies like uncovered options. This approach creates a situation where a client could incur significant losses before their capacity to handle such risks has been properly assessed, violating the principle of proactive risk management and client protection. Professional reasoning. Professionals must adopt a risk-based approach, prioritizing regulatory compliance and client protection. The decision-making process should begin with a clear understanding of the specific regulatory requirements for the type of account and trading activity requested. This involves conducting a thorough suitability assessment that considers the client's financial situation, investment experience, and objectives. Education and clear communication with the client about the risks involved are crucial. If a client does not meet the suitability standards for a particular type of trading, the firm must have a clear policy for declining or restricting such activity, rather than proceeding without proper due diligence. Question 8. Process analysis reveals that a registered representative in California who handles a discretionary options program for a client has been executing trades based on a general understanding of the client's risk tolerance without formal pre-approval for each trade. What is the most appropriate course of action for the registered options principal to ensure compliance with regulatory requirements? Option A. Instruct the registered representative to only execute options trades that are part of a pre-approved, standardized list of strategies for that client, without requiring individual trade approval. Option B. Implement a policy requiring written client authorization for the discretionary options program, a documented suitability review for each client, and pre-approval of all individual discretionary options trades by a designated registered options principal. Option C. Allow the registered representative to continue executing trades based on their existing understanding of the client's preferences, provided the client is informed of the trades shortly after they occur. Option D. Advise the registered representative to obtain verbal confirmation from the client for each discretionary options trade before execution. The correct answer is B. Implement a policy requiring written client authorization for the discretionary options program, a documented suitability review for each client, and pre-approval of all individual discretionary options trades by a designated registered options principal. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a registered options principal (ROP) to balance the firm's operational efficiency with the paramount duty of ensuring client suitability and preventing unauthorized discretionary trading in options programs. The inherent complexity of options strategies, coupled with the potential for rapid market movements, necessitates robust internal controls and clear communication protocols to safeguard client assets and maintain regulatory compliance within the state of California. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves establishing a clear, documented policy that mandates pre-approval for all discretionary options trades by a designated supervisor, who is also a registered options principal. This policy should outline specific criteria for granting discretion, including a thorough review of the client's financial situation, investment objectives, and risk tolerance as documented in the client's account agreement and suitability profile. Upon approval, the supervisor must then review each proposed discretionary trade to ensure it aligns with the client's profile and the approved program parameters. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the core regulatory requirement of supervision and suitability for discretionary accounts, as mandated by FINRA rules applicable in California, which emphasize the ROP's responsibility to supervise the firm's options business and ensure that all discretionary accounts are handled in accordance with established policies and client suitability. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves allowing the registered representative to execute discretionary options trades based solely on a verbal agreement with the client, without any written documentation or supervisory pre-approval. This fails to meet the regulatory requirement for documented client suitability and supervisory oversight. Verbal agreements are insufficient for establishing discretionary authority and do not provide a clear audit trail for regulatory review, increasing the risk of unauthorized trading and potential client disputes. Another incorrect approach is to permit the registered representative to initiate discretionary options trades and then inform the client of the trade after execution, without prior supervisory approval. This bypasses the essential supervisory function designed to prevent unsuitable or unauthorized transactions. It shifts the burden of oversight from the firm to the client post-trade, which is contrary to the principles of robust supervision and client protection. A further incorrect approach is to rely on the registered representative's general knowledge of the client's investment preferences to authorize discretionary options trades, without a formal, documented suitability assessment and specific program approval. While a representative may have a good rapport with a client, this informal understanding does not substitute for the rigorous suitability requirements and documented approval processes mandated for discretionary accounts, especially in complex products like options. This can lead to trades that, while perhaps aligned with general preferences, may not be suitable for the client's current financial situation or risk tolerance. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach discretionary account management by prioritizing a structured, documented, and supervisory-driven process. This involves understanding that discretion is a privilege granted by the client and a responsibility requiring stringent oversight by the firm. The decision-making framework should always begin with a thorough review of regulatory requirements, followed by the establishment of clear internal policies and procedures that are communicated and enforced. When faced with a situation involving potential discretionary trading, a professional should ask, is there a written agreement granting discretion? Has the client's suitability been formally assessed and documented? Has the proposed trade been pre-approved by a qualified supervisor in accordance with firm policy and regulatory guidelines? Adhering to this framework ensures compliance, protects clients, and mitigates firm risk. Question 9. Process analysis reveals that a registered options principal (ROP) in California is considering granting discretionary authority to a seasoned registered representative to manage options accounts for a select group of clients. What is the most appropriate and compliant method for the ROP to approve and oversee this discretionary authority? Option A. Grant discretionary authority based on the representative's years of service at the firm and their general reputation for competence, with the understanding that the ROP will monitor their activity periodically. Option B. Conduct a thorough assessment of the representative's experience and knowledge of options trading, obtain written approval from senior management, document the specific parameters of the discretionary authority granted, and establish a schedule for regular, periodic reviews of the representative's discretionary accounts. Option C. Prove discretionary authority without a defined review schedule, assuming the representative will act prudently, and that reviews will be conducted only if specific concerns arise or a client complaint is filed. Option D. Provide discretionary authority based on the representative's successful completion of the Series 7 exam and a brief verbal confirmation of their understanding of options trading risks. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough assessment of the representative's experience and knowledge of options trading, obtain written approval from senior management, document the specific parameters of the discretionary authority granted, and establish a schedule for regular, periodic reviews of the representative's discretionary accounts. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in the securities industry, particularly for registered options principals, ROP. The core difficulty lies in balancing the firm's obligation to supervise registered representatives with the need to grant appropriate discretion to experienced individuals managing client accounts, all while adhering to strict regulatory requirements. The challenge is amplified by the inherent risks associated with options trading, which necessitates robust oversight and clear approval processes. ROP must exercise careful judgment to ensure that any discretionary authority granted is well justified, properly documented, and consistently reviewed, preventing potential abuses or unsuitable trading practices. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a comprehensive, documented, and ongoing review process. This approach requires the ROP to thoroughly assess the registered representative's experience, qualification, and understanding of options strategies before granting discretionary authority. Crucially, it mandates a formal, written approval process that clearly defines the scope of discretion and establishes a schedule for regular, periodic reviews of the discretionary accounts managed by that representative. These reviews should include an examination of trading activity, performance, and adherence to client objectives and suitability standards. This aligns with FINRA Rule 3260, which governs discretionary accounts and emphasizes the principal's responsibility for supervision and review. The systematic nature of this approach ensures accountability and proactive risk management. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves granting discretionary authority based solely on the registered representative's tenure and a general understanding of their competence. This fails to meet the regulatory requirement for a specific, documented assessment of the representative's suitability for managing discretionary options accounts and lacks a defined review mechanism. Another incorrect approach is to approve discretionary authority without establishing a clear schedule for periodic reviews, relying instead on ad hoc checks. This creates a significant oversight gap, as potential issues may not be identified until they have escalated, violating the spirit and letter of supervisory rules. Finally, approving discretionary authority and then conducting reviews only when a client complaint arises is a reactive and insufficient measure. Regulatory frameworks demand proactive supervision and regular, scheduled reviews to prevent problems, not just address them after they occur. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach discretionary account approvals with a framework that prioritizes documentation, specific assessment, and continuous oversight. First, thoroughly evaluate the registered representative's qualifications and experience relevant to options trading and discretionary management. Second, establish a formal written approval process that explicitly outlines the scope of discretion and the types of accounts covered. Third, implement a rigorous scheduled review process for all discretionary accounts, examining trading activity, suitability, and performance against client objectives. This proactive and systematic approach ensures compliance with regulatory obligations and upholds ethical standards in client account management. Question 10. The performance metrics for a client account managed by your firm in the United States show a sudden and substantial increase in the volume of complex option spreads being executed over the past month, generating significant commission revenue. The client has been with the firm for 3 years and has previously engaged in moderate option trading. What is the most appropriate course of action for the registered options principal? Option A. Contact the client to confirm they are aware of the increased trading and associated commissions, and if they verbally agree, proceed with allowing the higher volume. Option B. Review the client's current account documentation, including their stated investment objectives, risk tolerance, and financial situation, and compare it against the recent trading activity to ensure continued suitability, documenting this review. Option C. Immediately approve the increased trading volume, assuming the client's prior experience and recent profitability indicate their comfort and understanding of the strategy. Option D. Focus on the increased commission revenue generated by the new trading activity and ensure the firm's compliance department is aware of the positive financial impact. The correct answer is B. Review the client's current account documentation, including their stated investment objectives, risk tolerance, and financial situation, and compare it against the recent trading activity to ensure continued suitability, documenting this review. Explanation: the performance metrics show a significant increase in trading volume for a particular option strategy. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the registered options principal (ROP) to not only understand the financial implications of the increased activity, but also to ensure that the account opening procedures and suitability requirements, as mandated by FINRA regulations in the United States, have been rigorously followed. The ROP must balance facilitating client business with upholding regulatory compliance and protecting the client from potential risks. The best professional practice involves a thorough review of the new account documentation and the client's established trading profile to confirm that the increased volume aligns with the client's stated investment objectives, risk tolerance, and financial situation. This includes verifying that the client's understanding of the strategy's risks is commensurate with the increased activity. Specifically, the ROP should cross-reference the current trading activity against the initial account agreement and any subsequent updates, ensuring that the client has been adequately informed about the specific option strategy being employed and that it remains suitable. This approach directly adheres to FINRA Rule 2111, Suitability, and the requirements for maintaining accurate and current customer account information, thereby fulfilling the ROP's supervisory obligations. An incorrect approach would be to approve the increased trading volume solely based on the client's historical profitability or the firm's desire to increase commission revenue. This fails to address the core suitability requirements, as past performance is not indicative of future results, and prioritizing revenue over client well-being is a direct violation of regulatory principles and ethical conduct. Another incorrect approach is to assume that because the client has traded options before, any new strategy or increased volume is automatically suitable. This overlooks the need for ongoing suitability assessments, especially when there's a notable shift in trading patterns or strategy complexity. Furthermore, approving the activity without a documented review of the client's updated financial situation or risk tolerance, even if the client verbally confirms their comfort, is insufficient. Regulatory requirements necessitate documented evidence of suitability, not just verbal assurances, particularly for more complex or higher-risk trading activities. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory compliance and client protection. This involves a systematic review of all new account documentation and any changes in client activity against established suitability rules. When significant deviations or increases in trading volume occur, a proactive and documented assessment of the client's current financial situation, investment objectives, and risk tolerance is paramount. This process should involve comparing the proposed activity against the client's profile and ensuring that all necessary disclosures have been made and understood. Question 11. Process analysis reveals that a registered options principal in California is reviewing a proposal to offer a new, complex options strategy to the firm's retail client base. The strategy has the potential for high returns, but also carries substantial risk. What is the most appropriate course of action for the ROP to ensure compliance with suitability requirements? Option A. Implement the strategy for all clients who have a history of trading options, as their prior experience suggests they are sophisticated enough to handle complex strategies. Option B. Proceed with offering the strategy to all clients who have previously expressed interest in speculative investments, assuming they understand and can tolerate the associated risks. Option C. Focus on marketing the strategy's potential for high returns to attract new clients. and address suitability concerns on a case-by-case basis only if a client explicitly inquires about the risks. Option D. Conduct a thorough review of each client's financial situation, investment objectives, and risk tolerance to determine if the new strategy is suitable for their individual profiles before recommending it. Correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough review of each client's financial situation, investment objectives, and risk tolerance to determine if the new strategy is suitable for their individual profiles before recommending it. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires the Registered Options Principle, ROP, to balance the firm's business objectives with the paramount duty of ensuring customer suitability. The ROP must navigate the inherent conflict between recommending products that generate revenue for the firm and ensuring those recommendations align with the client's best interests, financial situation, and investment objectives. Failure to do so can lead to significant regulatory sanctions, reputational damage, and harm to the client. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough and documented assessment of the client's financial situation, investment objectives, and risk tolerance before recommending any option strategy. This includes understanding the client's experience with options, their knowledge of the specific strategy being proposed, and their ability to absorb potential losses. The ROP must then match the recommended strategy to these documented client characteristics. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the core principles of FINRA Rule 2111, suitability, which mandates that firms and their associated persons have a reasonable basis to believe that a recommended transaction or investment strategy is suitable for a particular customer, based on the customer's investment profile. Ethical considerations also demand that the client's interests are prioritized over the firm's. Incorrect approach is analysis. Recommending a complex option strategy solely because it is a popular or profitable product for the firm, without a comprehensive suitability assessment, represents a significant regulatory failure. This approach prioritizes the firm's profit motive over the client's well-being, violating the spirit and letter of FINRA Rule 2111. Another incorrect approach involves assuming a client's understanding and risk tolerance based on their stated desire to make money quickly, without probing further into their financial capacity and knowledge. This assumption can lead to unsuitable recommendations and potential client losses, breaching the duty of care. Finally, recommending a strategy based on a superficial understanding of the client's profile, such as only noting their stated investment objective without considering their financial resources or experience, is also professionally unacceptable. This superficiality fails to establish the reasonable basis required by the suitability rule. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that begins with a comprehensive client discovery process. This discovery should be documented and include all relevant aspects of the client's investment profile. Recommendations should then be directly linked to this documented profile, with a clear rationale for how the proposed strategy meets the client's objectives and risk tolerance. Regular review and reevaluation of the client's profile and the suitability of existing recommendations are also crucial, especially when market conditions or the client's circumstances change. Question 12. The monitoring system demonstrates a pattern of frequent, unsolicited options trades in a discretionary account managed by a registered representative in California. Which of the following actions represents the most appropriate initial response for the registered principal? Option A. Conduct a detailed review of the trading activity, comparing it against the client's stated investment objectives, risk tolerance, and account history, and document all findings. Option B. Focus solely on whether the trades have generated profits for the client, as this indicates suitability. Option C. Accept the registered representative's verbal assurance that all trades are suitable and in the client's best interest. Option D. Immediately place a temporary restriction on all discretionary trading in the account pending a full investigation. The correct answer is A. Conduct a detailed review of the trading activity, comparing it against the client's stated investment objectives, risk tolerance, and account history, and document all findings. Explanation. The monitoring system demonstrates a pattern of frequent, unsolicited trades in a discretionary options account managed by a registered representative in California. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the principal to balance the firm's obligation to supervise with the client's right to discretionary trading, while ensuring that all trades are suitable and not indicative of potential abuse. The principal must exercise careful judgment to distinguish between legitimate trading activity and potential violations of FINRA Rule 2360, B. 18, and related suitability and supervision rules. The best professional approach involves a thorough, documented review of the trading activity in conjunction with the client's investment objectives and risk tolerance. This includes examining the rationale behind each trade, comparing it to the client's stated goals, and assessing whether the frequency and nature of the trades align with the client's profile. If the trades appear inconsistent or excessively frequent without clear justification, the principal must escalate the issue for further investigation, potentially involving a review of the representative's communications and the client's account history. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the core of the regulatory concern, ensuring that discretionary accounts are managed in the client's best interest and in accordance with suitability standards, as mandated by FINRA Rule 2360, B. 18, and the general principles of supervision. It prioritizes client protection and regulatory compliance by seeking objective evidence of suitability and proper management. An incorrect approach involves immediately assuming the registered representative is acting improperly and placing an immediate, blanket restriction on all discretionary trading in the account. This is professionally unacceptable because it infringes upon the client's established discretionary authority without sufficient evidence of wrongdoing. It also fails to consider that the trading activity, while frequent, might be entirely suitable for the client's aggressive investment strategy. This approach bypasses the necessary investigative steps and can damage the client relationship and the firm's reputation. Another incorrect approach is to simply accept the registered representative's verbal assurance that all trades are suitable without independent verification or documentation. This is professionally unacceptable because it relies on hearsay and lacks the objective evidence required for proper supervision. FINRA rules require principals to have a reasonable basis to believe that recommendations and transactions are suitable, and this cannot be established solely on verbal assurances, especially in the face of potentially concerning trading patterns. A final incorrect approach is to focus solely on the profitability of the trades, assuming that if the client is making money, the trading activity is acceptable. This is professionally unacceptable because suitability is not solely determined by profit. The nature of the trades, the risk involved, the client's risk tolerance, and the alignment with stated investment objectives are all critical factors. Profitable trades can still be unsuitable if they involve excessive risk for the client or are executed in a manner that suggests churning or other manipulative practices, which are prohibited under FINRA rules. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic review of the flagged activity, gathering all relevant documentation, account statements, trade blotters, client profile, representatives' notes, assessing the activity against regulatory requirements and firm policies, and documenting all findings and actions taken. If concerns persist, escalation to compliance or legal departments is crucial. Question 13. Strategic planning requires a registered options principal in New York to evaluate a client's account where discretionary trading authority has been granted. The client has expressed a moderate risk tolerance and a goal of capital preservation with some modest growth. The ROP identifies an opportunity to execute a series of short-term, out-of-the-money options trades that, while carrying a high probability of expiring worthless, could generate substantial commissions for the firm if executed frequently. What is the most appropriate course of action for the ROP? Option A. Proceed with the high-commission options trades without extensive suitability review, relying on the fact that the client has granted discretionary authority. Option B. Execute a high volume of short-term, out-of-the-money options trades to maximize commission revenue, leveraging the discretionary authority granted by the client. Option C. Recommend and execute option strategies that are demonstrably suitable for the client's stated objectives and risk tolerance, ensuring that any recommended trades are well documented and clearly justified as being in the client's best interest, even if they generate lower commissions. Option D. Recommend complex, leveraged option strategies that have the potential for significant gains, assuming the client's discretionary authority implies a willingness to accept higher risk. The correct answer is C. Recommend and execute option strategies that are demonstrably suitable for the client's stated objectives and risk tolerance, ensuring that any recommended trades are well documented and clearly justified as being in the client's best interest, even if they generate lower commissions. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a registered options principal (ROP) to balance the fiduciary duty owed to a client with the potential for generating revenue for the firm. The ROP must navigate the complexities of Rule 15C1-7 under the Securities Exchange Act of 1934, which governs discretionary accounts, ensuring that any recommendations are suitable and not driven by the firm's or the ROP's personal interests. The core ethical dilemma lies in distinguishing between a genuine investment opportunity that benefits the client and a transaction that primarily serves to increase commissions or firm profits, especially when the client has delegated trading authority. The best professional approach involves a thorough suitability assessment and clear communication with the client. This means understanding the client's financial situation, investment objectives, and risk tolerance, and then recommending option strategies that align with these factors. If the client has granted discretionary authority, the ROP must still act in the client's best interest, making recommendations that are suitable and documented. This approach is correct because it directly adheres to the spirit and letter of Rule 15C1-7, which mandates that discretionary accounts be handled with the same care and diligence as non-discretionary ones, prioritizing the client's welfare above all else. It also aligns with FINRA ethical guidelines for registered representatives, emphasizing suitability and avoiding conflicts of interest. An incorrect approach would be to execute a series of complex, high-commission options trades solely because the client has granted discretionary authority, and the ROP believes these trades could generate significant revenue for the firm, without a clear and documented rationale demonstrating their suitability for the client's specific investment profile. This fails to meet the fiduciary duty and violates Rule 15C1-7 by prioritizing firm profit over client benefit. Another incorrect approach is to recommend option strategies that are overly speculative or complex for the client's stated risk tolerance, even if the client has granted discretionary authority. This demonstrates a disregard for the suitability requirements inherent in managing discretionary accounts. Finally, failing to adequately document the rationale behind discretionary trades, particularly those that are complex or generate substantial commissions, is also a failure. This lack of documentation makes it impossible to demonstrate that the trades were made in the client's best interest and in compliance with regulatory requirements. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a comprehensive understanding of the client's profile. This should be followed by an objective evaluation of any proposed investment, considering its suitability and potential benefits relative to the client's objectives and risk tolerance. Any recommendation, especially within a discretionary account, must be justifiable based on this client-centric assessment. Transparency and clear documentation of the decision-making process are paramount to ensure compliance and maintain client trust. Question 14. Analysis of a new client application for options trading in California. A registered representative has submitted a new account form indicating the client is highly experienced in options trading and wishes to engage in complex strategies. The firm's policy requires the registered options principal (ROP) to approve all options accounts. The ROP is aware that the registered representative is eager to onboard new high-net-worth clients. What is the most appropriate action for the ROP to take? Option A. Approve the account with a note stating the client is sophisticated without further independent verification of their options trading knowledge or financial capacity. Option B. Conduct a thorough review of the client's new account form, including their stated investment objectives, financial situation, risk tolerance, and any provided documentation supporting their claimed options trading experience before granting approval. Option C. Approve the account immediately based on the registered representative's assurance that the client is experienced, given the firm's need to grow its client base. Option D. Approve the account and then instruct the registered representative to follow up with the client to confirm their options trading experience and knowledge. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough review of the client's new account form, including their stated investment objectives, financial situation, risk tolerance, and any provided documentation supporting their claimed options trading experience before granting approval. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a registered options principal (ROP) to balance the firm's desire to onboard new clients with the absolute regulatory mandate to ensure all accounts are opened in compliance with FINRA rules, specifically regarding suitability and the opening of options accounts. The ROP must exercise sound judgment to prevent potential regulatory violations and protect both the firm and the client from undue risk. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the client's financial situation, investment objectives, and risk tolerance, as documented in the new account form and any supporting information provided by the registered representative. This review must be conducted by the ROP or a qualified delegate before the account is approved for options trading. The ROP must then ensure that the client's stated experience and knowledge of options trading are consistent with the level of trading activity requested. This aligns with FINRA Rule 2111, Suitability, and the specific requirements for opening options accounts, which necessitate a documented understanding of the risks involved and the client's capacity to bear those risks. The ROP's signature signifies that this due diligence has been performed and that the account meets all regulatory requirements for options trading. An incorrect approach would be to approve the account based solely on the registered representative's assurance that the client is experienced, without independently verifying this information or reviewing the client's documentation. This bypasses the ROP's essential gatekeeping function and violates the principle of due diligence mandated by FINRA. It exposes the firm to significant regulatory risk, as the ROP is ultimately responsible for ensuring compliance. Another incorrect approach is to approve the account with a note indicating that the client is sophisticated, without any objective basis or documentation to support this assertion. Sophistication is not a substitute for a thorough suitability review. It must be demonstrated through the client's financial standing, investment experience, and knowledge, all of which must be documented and assessed. Approving based on a vague assertion of sophistication without proper substantiation is a failure to adhere to regulatory requirements. Finally, approving the account and then delegating the responsibility of verifying the client's options trading experience to the registered representative after the fact is also an unacceptable approach. The ROP's approval signifies that the account is ready for options trading at the time of approval. Post-approval verification by the representative does not fulfill the ROP's initial obligation to ensure compliance before the account is open for options activity. Professionals should approach such situations by establishing a clear, documented process for new account approvals, particularly for options accounts. This process should include mandatory review of all client documentation by the ROP or a designated supervisor, verification of stated experience against objective criteria, and a clear understanding of the firm's policies and FINRA rules governing options account openings. When in doubt, the ROP should err on the side of caution and request further information or deny approval until all requirements are met. Question 15. The review process indicates that a registered representative under your supervision has been engaging in trading activity that appears to be inconsistent with their stated investment strategy and has received numerous customer complaints alleging misrepresentation. What is the most appropriate initial course of action to address these findings in compliance with FINRA rules? Option A. Issue a verbal warning to the registered representative, emphasizing the importance of adhering to their investment strategy and addressing customer concerns, and monitor their activity more closely going forward. Option B. Dismiss the concerns based on the registered representative's long tenure with the firm and a history of generally positive performance, assuming the complaints are isolated incidents. Option C. Initiate a comprehensive internal investigation, including a review of the representative's trading records, client communications, and supervisory oversight, to determine the extent of any rule violations and potential conflicts of interest. Option D. Focus on the potential impact of the complaints on the firm's profitability and reputation, and consider a settlement with the complainants without a thorough investigation into the representative's conduct. Correct answer is C. Initiate a comprehensive internal investigation, including a review of the representative's trading records, client communications, and supervisory oversight, to determine the extent of any rule violations and potential conflicts of interest. Explanation. The review process indicates a potential conflict of interest and a failure to adequately supervise, which are critical areas under FINRA rules for registered options principles, ROP. The scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the ROP to balance the firm's business objectives with the paramount duty to protect customers and uphold regulatory standards. A failure to act decisively and ethically can lead to significant regulatory sanctions, reputational damage, and harm to investors. The best approach involves a thorough, documented investigation into the specific allegations, focusing on the ROP's supervisory responsibilities and the potential for conflicts of interest. This includes reviewing trading activity, communication records, and supervisory procedures related to the registered representative. The ROP must then take appropriate disciplinary action and implement enhanced supervision if violations are confirmed, ensuring compliance with FINRA Rule 3260, trading ahead of research reports, and FINRA Rule 3310, supervisory and compliance procedures. This proactive and investigative stance directly addresses the core concerns raised by the review process and aligns with the ROP's duty to supervise and maintain a compliant trading environment. An approach that involves merely issuing a verbal warning to the registered representative without further investigation or documentation is professionally unacceptable. This fails to establish a clear record of supervisory action, neglects the potential for systemic issues, and does not provide adequate assurance that the conduct will not be repeated. It bypasses the due diligence required by FINRA supervisory rules. Another unacceptable approach is to dismiss the concerns outright based on the registered representative's tenure and perceived good performance. Regulatory compliance and ethical conduct are not contingent on an individual's history. Each allegation must be investigated impartially. This approach ignores the potential for even experienced individuals to violate rules and demonstrates a lack of diligence in fulfilling supervisory obligations. Finally, an approach that focuses solely on the potential financial impact on the firm without a thorough investigation into the alleged misconduct is also professionally flawed. While business considerations are relevant, they cannot supersede regulatory requirements and the duty to protect customers. This approach prioritizes profit over compliance and ethical responsibility, which is a direct violation of the ROP's fiduciary duties. Professionals should approach such situations by first recognizing the seriousness of the review's findings. They must then adopt a systematic, investigative mindset, gathering all relevant facts and documentation. Decision-making should be guided by FINRA rules, ethical principles, and a commitment to customer protection, ensuring that any actions taken are proportionate, well-documented, and aimed at preventing future violations. Question 16. Performance analysis shows that a client of your firm, who is actively trading options in their margin account in California, has exceeded the permissible limit for uncovered short positions as defined by FINRA Rule 2360(b)(7). The client, a sophisticated investor with a long-standing relationship with the firm, has been informed of the breach and has requested to be allowed to correct the position by the end of the next trading day, citing a complex market maneuver they are executing. As the registered options principal, how should you proceed? Option A. Advise the client to close out the entire uncovered short position by buying back the options immediately. Option B. Allow the client to maintain the uncovered short position for one additional trading day to correct it. As requested. Option C. Overlook the violation for this trading day, given the client's experience and profitable trading history, and address it at the end of the day. Option D. Immediately require the client to reduce their uncovered short position to comply with the limit. The correct answer is D. Immediately require the client to reduce their uncovered short position to comply with the limit. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the firm's financial interests with the regulatory obligation to protect customers from excessive risk. The registered options principal ROP must exercise sound judgment to ensure compliance with FINRA Rule 2360(b)(7), while also considering the potential impact on client relationships and the firm's reputation. The temptation to overlook minor deviations for the sake of expediency or client satisfaction must be resisted in favor of strict adherence to regulatory requirements. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves immediately addressing the uncovered short position by requiring the client to reduce the position to comply with the limit. This approach directly upholds the spirit and letter of FINRA Rule 2360(b)(7), which aims to prevent excessive risk-taking by limiting uncovered short option positions. Prompt action ensures that the client's account is brought into compliance without delay, thereby mitigating potential losses for both the client and the firm and avoiding regulatory violations. This proactive stance demonstrates a commitment to regulatory compliance and client protection. Incorrect approach is analysis, allowing the client to maintain the uncovered short position for an additional day, even with the promise of correction, constitutes a direct violation of FINRA Rule 2360, B. 7. This approach prioritizes client convenience over regulatory mandate and exposes the firm and the client to undue risk. It creates a precedent for overlooking rules and could lead to more significant compliance issues in the future, suggesting the client close out the position by buying back the options, without first addressing the fact that the position is already in violation of the uncovered short limit, fails to rectify the immediate regulatory breach. While closing the position is a desirable outcome, the primary obligation is to ensure the position itself is compliant with the established limits. This approach bypasses the necessary step of bringing the existing position into compliance. Ignoring the violation because the client is experienced and has a history of profitable trades is a grave ethical and regulatory failure. FINRA rules apply universally, regardless of a client's experience or past performance. This approach demonstrates a disregard for established risk management protocols and regulatory oversight, potentially leading to significant financial and reputational damage for both the client and the firm. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situation should first identify the specific regulatory requirement being tested. In this case, it is the limit on uncovered short positions under FINRA Rule 2360, B. 7. The next step is to assess the client's current position against this rule. If a violation exists, the immediate and primary obligation is to bring the account into compliance. This involves direct communication with the client to explain the rule and the necessary corrective action. Professionals should always err on the side of caution and strict compliance, as regulatory breaches can have severe consequences. Documenting all communications and actions taken is also crucial for demonstrating due diligence. Question 17. Market research demonstrates that a client holds an out-of-the-money American-style index option with only a few days remaining until expiration. The underlying index has experienced a significant, albeit potentially temporary, upward surge in the last trading session, pushing the index value slightly above the option's strike price. As a registered options principal in California, what is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Advise the client to let the option expire worthless to avoid any potential transaction costs associated with exercising. Option B. Advise the client on the potential benefits and drawbacks of exercising the option now, considering the remaining time value, potential tax implications, and the client's overall investment objectives, before recommending a course of action. Option C. Immediately exercise the option to capture the current in-the-money position, as the index may decline before expiration. Option D. Exercise the option based on the recent positive momentum of the underlying index, assuming the client would want to capitalize on this short-term gain. The correct answer is B. Advise the client on the potential benefits and drawbacks of exercising the option now, considering the remaining time value, potential tax implications, and the client's overall investment objectives, before recommending a course of action. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it pits the immediate financial interests of a client against the broader market implications and regulatory obligations of an options principal. The principal must exercise sound judgment to ensure that any action taken is not only beneficial to the client, but also compliant with FINRA rules and ethical standards, particularly concerning the exercise of American-style index options. The best professional approach involves a thorough understanding of the client's objectives and the specific characteristics of the index option. This includes evaluating the option's intrinsic and time value, the underlying index's recent performance and outlook, and the potential tax implications of exercising versus letting the option expire. Crucially, the principal must confirm that the exercise is in the client's best interest, considering all relevant factors, and that the client has been fully informed of the consequences. This aligns with FINRA Rule 2121, which requires fair dealing with customers, and the general ethical obligation to act in the client's best interest. The principal's role is to provide informed guidance, not to unilaterally make decisions that could be construed as manipulative or self-serving. An incorrect approach would be to exercise the option solely based on a short-term, speculative view of the index, without a comprehensive assessment of the client's overall financial situation and investment goals. This could lead to unnecessary transaction costs or suboptimal outcomes for the client, violating the duty of fair dealing. Another incorrect approach is to exercise the option simply because it is in the money, without considering the time value remaining or alternative strategies. American-style options offer flexibility, and exercising prematurely might forego potential further gains or incur losses due to uncaptured time value, which is not in the client's best interest. Finally, exercising the option based on rumors or unverified market sentiment, without independent analysis or confirmation, is professionally irresponsible. This could expose the client to undue risk and demonstrates a failure to uphold the standards of due diligence expected of a registered options principal. Professionals should approach such situations by first clarifying the client's objectives and risk tolerance. Then they must conduct a comprehensive analysis of the option's characteristics, the underlying index, and market conditions. This analysis should be followed by a clear explanation of the potential outcomes of various actions, exercise, sell, hold, to the client, enabling an informed decision. The principal's role is to facilitate this informed decision-making process, ensuring all actions are compliant and ethically sound. Question 18. Investigation of a registered options principal's supervisory practices in a New York-based brokerage firm reveals a need to enhance oversight of its options trading desks. The principal is considering different strategies to ensure compliance with FINRA regulations. Which of the following approaches best balances effective supervision with operational efficiency? Option A. Primarily rely on customer complaints as the sole trigger for initiating supervisory reviews of options trading activities. Option B. Mandate that all registered representatives submit detailed daily trading logs for every options transaction, irrespective of the representative's experience or the nature of the trade, for immediate review by the principal. Option C. Delegate all day-to-day supervision of options trading to the individual registered representatives, assuming their consistent profitability indicates adherence to regulations. Option D. Implement a risk-based review system that focuses on identifying and investigating significant deviations from established trading patterns, unusual transaction volumes, or trades that appear to carry excessive risk, while maintaining regular communication with brokers about compliance expectations. The correct answer is D. Implement a risk-based review system that focuses on identifying and investigating significant deviations from established trading patterns, unusual transaction volumes, or trades that appear to carry excessive risk, while maintaining regular communication with brokers about compliance expectations. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a registered options principal, ROP, to balance the firm's obligation to supervise its registered persons with the need to avoid undue interference in the day-to-day trading activities of experienced and successful brokers. The ROP must identify potential supervisory lapses without stifling legitimate business practices, a delicate balance that demands careful judgment and a thorough understanding of regulatory expectations. Correct approach analysis. The best approach involves a targeted review of trading activity that deviates from established patterns or exhibits characteristics that could indicate potential misconduct, such as excessive risk-taking, unauthorized trading, or churning. This approach is correct because it aligns with FINRA Rule 3110, supervision, and the general principles of effective supervision, which mandate that firms establish and maintain a supervisory system reasonably designed to achieve compliance with applicable securities laws and regulations. By focusing on anomalies and deviations, the ROP can efficiently allocate supervisory resources to areas with the highest potential for risk, ensuring that the firm meets its supervisory obligations without imposing unnecessary burdens on its brokers. This proactive and risk-based approach demonstrates a commitment to both compliance and operational efficiency. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach would be to implement a blanket policy requiring all brokers to submit detailed daily trading logs for every transaction, regardless of the broker's experience or the nature of the trades. This approach is flawed because it is overly broad, inefficient, and potentially burdensome, exceeding the reasonable supervisory requirements outlined by FINRA. It fails to acknowledge that experienced brokers with a history of compliant behavior may not require such intensive scrutiny for every trade. Such a rigid system could be seen as a failure to tailor supervision to the specific risks associated with different individuals and activities, potentially leading to a less effective overall supervisory program. Another incorrect approach would be to rely solely on customer complaints as the primary indicator of supervisory issues. While customer complaints are an important component of supervision, they are reactive and may not capture all instances of misconduct. A supervisory system that waits for complaints to arise before investigating potential problems would be considered deficient under FINRA rules, as it lacks the proactive element necessary to prevent violations. This approach fails to meet the obligation to establish a system reasonably designed to detect and prevent violations. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to delegate all supervisory responsibilities for options trading to the individual brokers themselves, assuming that their success implies compliance. This abdication of responsibility is a clear violation of FINRA Rule 3110. The ROP has a non-delegible duty to supervise, assuming that success equates to compliance without any independent oversight or review, is a failure to establish and maintain a supervisory system and procedures. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing similar situations should adopt a risk-based supervisory framework. This involves understanding the business activities of the firm and its registered representatives, identifying potential risks associated with those activities, and implementing supervisory procedures that are reasonably designed to detect and prevent violations. This includes establishing clear policies and procedures, providing adequate training, conducting regular reviews of trading activity and other relevant data, and responding promptly and effectively to any red flags or customer complaints. The goal is to create a culture of compliance where supervision is integrated into the daily operations of the firm, rather than being an afterthought. Question 19. Comparative studies suggest that the approval process for accounts engaging in uncovered short option contracts is a critical control point for managing risk. In the state of California, a registered options principal (ROP) is reviewing a new customer application for the purpose of writing uncovered calls and puts. The customer has a substantial income and net worth and has indicated they have some experience trading options. The ROP's firm has a general policy for approving options accounts, but lacks specific, detailed written procedures for the unique risks associated with uncovered short option writing. Which of the following actions by the ROP best adheres to the regulatory requirements for opening such an account? Option A. Approve the account after the customer signs a form acknowledging they have read and understood the risks associated with uncovered short option contracts, without further independent verification of their comprehension or financial capacity. Option B. Approve the account based on the customer's stated income and net worth, assuming their some experience is sufficient for uncovered option writing, and rely on the firm's general options account approval policy. Option C. Delegate the final approval of this account to a senior registered representative who has experience with options, instructing them to ensure the customer understands the basic risks. Option D. Conduct a thorough, documented review of the customer's options trading history, specifically probing their understanding of the potential for unlimited losses on short calls and substantial losses on short puts, and verify their financial capacity to meet margin calls and absorb potential losses before granting approval. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough, documented review of the customer's options trading history, specifically probing their understanding of the potential for unlimited losses on short calls and substantial losses on short puts, and verify their financial capacity to meet margin calls and absorb potential losses before granting approval. Explanation. This scenario presents a professionally challenging situation because it requires a registered options principal (ROP) to balance the firm's need to generate revenue with their absolute obligation to ensure compliance with FINRA Rule 2360(b) 16(e) regarding the opening of accounts for uncovered short option contracts. The challenge lies in the inherent risk associated with uncovered short options and the strict requirements for account approval, which are designed to protect both the customer and the firm from potential losses. ROP must exercise sound judgment and a thorough understanding of the regulatory framework to prevent improper account openings. The correct approach involves a rigorous, documented review process that specifically assesses the customer's financial situation, investment experience, and risk tolerance in relation to the substantial risks of uncovered short option writing. This includes verifying that the customer has a deep understanding of the potential for unlimited losses and has demonstrated the financial capacity to absorb such losses. The firm must have established written supervisory procedures that are consistently applied, and the ROP's approval must be based on a documented determination that the customer meets all the stringent requirements outlined in FINRA Rule 2360(b)(16). This ensures that the account is opened only after all regulatory prerequisites are met, and the customer is fully aware of and capable of handling the associated risks. An incorrect approach would be to approve the account based on a cursory review of the customer's stated income and net worth, without a detailed assessment of their options, trading experience, and understanding of uncovered short option risks. This fails to meet the spirit and letter of the rule, which mandates a thorough evaluation beyond mere financial figures. Another incorrect approach is to delegate the final approval of such accounts to a junior registered representative without adequate supervision or a clear understanding of the specific requirements for uncovered short option accounts. This constitutes a failure of supervision and a violation of the ROP's responsibilities. Finally, proving the account based on the customer's assertion that they have read the risk disclosure, without independently verifying their comprehension and financial wherewithal to withstand potential losses, is also a regulatory failure. The rule requires more than a passive acknowledgement. It demands an active assessment of suitability and capacity. Professionals should approach such situations by first consulting the firm's written supervisory procedures for opening accounts involving uncovered short option contracts. They must then conduct a comprehensive review of the customer's application, focusing on their options trading history, knowledge of complex strategies, and financial capacity to meet margin requirements and absorb potential losses. Documentation is paramount. All approvals must be supported by detailed notes and evidence demonstrating compliance with the specific requirements of FINRA Rule 2360(b)(16). If any doubt exists regarding the customer's suitability or understanding, the account should not be approved. Question 20. The investigation demonstrates that a registered options principal at a FINRA-regulated firm in California is reviewing the firm's written procedures for opening new accounts that will trade uncovered options. The firm's current procedures calculate the initial margin requirement for uncovered calls as 30% of the market value of the underlying stock, plus the amount the option is in the money, and for uncovered puts as 30% of the market value of the underlying stock minus the amount the option is in the money. The principal needs to determine if these procedures comply with FINRA Rule 4210. Option A. The procedures are not compliant because FINRA Rule 4210 requires the greater of 30% of the underlying stock's market value or a fixed dollar amount, e.g., $250 for options on stocks trading below $5, $500 for options on stocks trading at or above $5, plus or minus the in-the-money amount. Option B. The procedures are compliant because they use a fixed percentage, 30%, of the underlying stock's market value, which is a standard margin rate across various securities. Option C. The procedures are compliant because the firm's internal risk management system automatically adjusts for any deficiencies, making the initial calculation less critical. Option D. The procedures are compliant because they correctly apply a percentage of the underlying stock's market value and adjust for the in-the-money amount, which is the general principle of margin calculation for uncovered options. The correct answer is D. The procedures are compliant because they correctly apply a percentage of the underlying stock's market value and adjust for the in-the-money amount, which is the general principle of margin calculation for uncovered options. Explanation. The investigation demonstrates a scenario where a registered options principal must evaluate the adequacy of a firm's written procedures for handling uncovered options accounts, specifically concerning initial margin requirements. This is professionally challenging because the calculation of margin for uncovered options is complex and carries significant risk for both the client and the firm. Failure to adhere to precise regulatory requirements can lead to substantial financial losses, regulatory sanctions, and reputational damage. The principal must possess a thorough understanding of the relevant rules and be able to apply them accurately to specific client situations. The best approach involves a meticulous review of the firm's written procedures against the specific margin requirements outlined by FINRA Rule 4210 for uncovered option positions. This includes verifying that the procedures correctly calculate the initial margin based on the greater of a percentage of the underlying security's market value, or a fixed dollar amount, plus or minus any in-the-money amount, and ensuring that the firm system automatically flags and enforces these requirements upon account opening and for subsequent trades. This aligns with the regulatory mandate to establish and maintain adequate procedures to ensure compliance with margin rules, thereby protecting both the client's capital and the firm from undue risk. An incorrect approach would be to rely solely on a general understanding of margin principles, without referencing the specific calculations mandated by FINRA Rule 4210. This oversight fails to address the precise regulatory framework governing uncovered options, potentially leading to undermargining and increased risk. Another incorrect approach would be to assume that the firm's standard margin procedures for covered options are sufficient for uncovered options. This is a critical error because uncovered options carry substantially higher risk and thus require more stringent margin calculations as defined by specific rules. A further incorrect approach would be to delegate the review of these procedures to a junior staff member without adequate oversight or specific training on uncovered options margin calculations. This abdication of responsibility by the principal violates their supervisory duties and the firm's obligation to have robust internal controls. Professionals should approach such situations by first identifying the specific regulatory rule applicable to the product or activity in question. In this case, FINRA Rule 4210 for uncovered options margin. They should then compare the firm's documented procedures directly against the rule's requirements, paying close attention to any quantitative calculations or specific steps mandated. Any discrepancies or ambiguities should be flagged for immediate correction. If the situation involves complex calculations, it is prudent to perform sample calculation to verify the accuracy of the firm's procedures and systems.